Okay, so welcome back to another episode of the Blossoming Mama podcast. I hope you're doing well. I'm definitely doing pretty good. It is the middle of the week and things are going very well for the family. We had some really fun times in the beginning of the week. My daughter had her very first play and it was adorable, y'all. Oh my God. I thought I was going to cry up until the point where I actually sat down and she got on stage and then I realized the feeling that probably every mother gets, which is being nervous. Like, I didn't think that I was going to be nervous for her because she's 4 years old, but I definitely was. And I could see it all over her face too. But she was so brave and she did amazing. She was definitely one of the shining stars on the stage. And I'm just so proud of her. Everything that she does as she gets older, she just amazes me with how bold and confident and self assured she is. And that is actually going to be something that I talk about later because today we're going to be talking about my conception stories. I'm going to take a break from the series that I've been doing because it's kind of heavy. And honestly, I thought this would just be a fun episode for someone out there who is trying to conceive or like thinking about it in the future. I know I definitely love to hear birth stories, but you don't hear the pre-birth, the conception stories as much. And that's something that a lot of people have on their minds, like how babies are actually made, like the preparation. Yeah, so today I'm going to be sharing the stories of how we conceived our three children. Before I get into the episode, like the meat and bones of it, I want to ask you guys to help me out. So this is a brand new podcast, and the way that it gets visibility is by people interacting with it. So if you like this episode and any other episodes before this and after this, can you do me a favor and rate us, with the number of stars that you think we deserve? And also take the time to fill out the what did you think about this episode. It helps the podcast when the algorithm sees that people are interacting with it. So yeah, do me that favor and let's get into the episode. Okay, so each story is actually a very different story. Each child has a very unique origin story, I guess. But some of the universal truths to their stories are that we conceived them on the very first try. So all of my children, it was one and done. And as a Christian, I say blessed. If you're not, maybe you say lucky, but it is definitely a blessing. And I recognize that is not something that is true for every couple out there. But yeah, we were definitely blessed in the sense that we really didn't have to try very hard when we decided to have a child. One of them we didn't decide, disclaimer, but when we were going to make a baby, we made one. So thanking God for that. I know that that's not everyone's story. And yeah, so take that with, I guess, a grain of salt for anyone who is listening that that's not necessarily going to be the case. In fact, with most recommendations from doctors and like fertility specialists, they are actually not concerned if it takes up to a year for a healthy couple to conceive. And that's because it is probably, I don't know the exact number, but I've read like 33% of a chance that you'll get pregnant. Yeah, I think it's somewhere around 30% chance every time you try that you'll actually conceive. Don't quote me on that. I don't know the specifics, but it's something like that the chances are not very high each month that you try. Now, with that being said, knowing what I know about what increases your chances of, conceiving fairly quickly, we had a lot of boxes checked. We both are fairly healthy people. We always have been. We've been in athletics our entire lives. We continue to work out whenever we can. We eat fairly healthy. I've always had very regular periods, and was fairly aware of my cycles because I didn't use birth control for most of my life. I have terrible reactions to birth control. It doesn't necessarily affect me kind of physically in the sense of like, different body changes, but it definitely impacts my mood and it makes me honestly crazy. So I tend to avoid it as much as I can. And I was doing that. And that makes me very aware of my fertile window and everything like that. So yeah, I guess we can get into the first baby. This is in 2018. I'm looking at my notes because I'm going to forget. So yeah, in 2018, at the end of the year, it was actually December, and we actually conceived probably on New Year's Eve or like New Year's Day. It was like the changeover. I want to say that this baby was both consciously and unconsciously conceived because we were not yet married. And at the time, I was fairly loyal to abstinence before marriage. And I remember feeling a lot of guilt whenever we would like have sex because I was in the phase where, I was really focused on my walk with Christ. And, I know that, sex before marriage is a sin. And I was just trying really hard to honor that. And it was really hard. My husband's really hot. Like, okay, so just a little backstory. When I met my husband, it was a kind of like sexual relationship to start with. And then I actually moved away and we didn't talk for a long time. It wasn't like anything bad that happened. It was just because I had left the town that we lived in and moved across the country. And so we were dating other people and just kind of like living our lives. And at that time is when I kind of renewed my faith in Jesus and, just re-accepted him into my life. And that's when I decided to abstain from having any sex because, I decided or I believed that it was a sin. And so when we reconnected, that was something that I told him right away that if we were going to, date each other and be serious, that he would have to be okay with not having sex. And he absolutely was. And I will say that throughout this premarital time, anytime that we did engage in sexual relations, it was initiated by me. My husband never initiated it, which I always give him credit for because he at the time was not on the same spiritual walk that I was on. I mean, he has a belief in Jesus, but it was just not the same, level, I would say. And so for him to honor that, I always have admired. And obviously I married him. So, that was bonus points for him. So at the time that we conceived our first baby, we were in that time. And so when I say unconsciously, it was because it was not the right time, but then consciously because when the night came, it, like I said, it was New Year's Eve, and we were just like having the best time of our life. We went out in Houston, which we love. We both love downtown Houston, and we just had a really nice night. We had a beautiful like 4-course meal. We had like rooftop drinks, and then we had gotten a hotel down there so that we wouldn't, drink and drive or anything like that. And we had a beautiful hotel room. And so kind of all of the, I guess, stars aligned. And by the time the ball was getting ready to drop, all our clothes were getting ready to drop too. So yeah, so I knew going into that night that I was ovulating because I track my cycles. And yeah, so when we did the deed, there was no restraint, if you know what I mean. And yeah, so whenever the night was over, I remember laying in the bed and kind of like thinking about it, but then just being like, well, you know what? If it happens, it happens. Because at that time too, I didn't know that the chances of getting pregnant right away were slim. Like I knew of the statistic of, 30% or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, if it happens, it would be, it's very unlikely to happen. So I'm not going to stress about it. So the next day I didn't take like a plan B or anything. I knew at the time that I loved this man, that we were likely going to get married. So there was no reason for me to overreact or do anything crazy. And so I went through my life, in the next couple of weeks. And, I didn't feel like anything different. I felt like maybe a couple of days I felt a little nauseous when I was hungry. But other than that, I didn't have any symptoms leading up to finding out that I was pregnant. The day before I was set to get my period, I just felt like I should take a test because yeah, the nausea, I think. I can't remember exactly what it was. I just felt like maybe it was intuition telling me. And so I did. And it was one of those like blue dyed tests. And it was a very faint line. And when I went into the trying to conceive community, like, if you know, you know. Like, if you. I can't explain the trying to conceive community, but it's a big one and they're incredibly helpful. But they have so many threads like on babycenter.com, and there's groups on Facebook, and they post different pregnancy tests, and people vote on whether or not it's positive or negative. So it's a big community, and they have a lot of input up there on the internet. So anyway, in all the blogs and things that I was in, they were saying that blue dye tests are not accurate. And so they recommended getting the purple or pink dye. So I didn't have any of those, and I took the test at night. So I had to wait until the next day to go to the I don't know, Walmart or something. And that's when I got the proper test. And so I took that test and it was for sure positive. And yeah, I remember being super scared because never been pregnant before. I had literally never seen a positive test in my life. So very overwhelmed there. And then I was, we weren't married. There was the whole Christian aspect. My husband had actually just moved down there. Like, he had just come from his town to Houston, where I lived, not too long ago. So we really weren't established as a family yet. And so there was a lot of unknowns and uncertainties. And I definitely carried that into that pregnancy. And I also just had a lot of disbelief because I just couldn't believe that we got pregnant the very first time. Like, the very first time. So yeah, I'm not going to spend time on the pregnancies. I'll definitely have to do a different video about that. But if you've listened to previous episodes or just like know me as a person, then you know that I actually lost that baby. So I found out that I was pregnant at 4 weeks exactly. I think it was on the day that I was set to get my period. And then somewhere around 6 weeks, almost 7 weeks, I had a miscarriage. So that was really sad. And of course, I have gotten to the point where I can definitely talk about it. If you guys want to hear that story, I don't mind sharing it. I think people don't share those stories enough. Having a miscarriage happens to 1 in 5 women. So it's actually incredibly common, especially early on in pregnancy. So I absolutely don't mind talking about it. But moving into the next pregnancy. Okay, so this is my daughter's pregnancy. And as I said before, her personality is one to be reckoned with. And boy, oh boy, so is her conception story. All right, so let's get into that. So as I said, we conceived the first baby going into 2019. So December 31st, 2018 into January 1st, 2019. I found out about the miscarriage on January 28th. And the next few months were very rough, of course, losing a child, incredibly hard. And we were not trying to make another baby. I mean, I think I was both obsessed with getting pregnant again and then also terrified to get pregnant again. And if you have experienced loss, then you know what I mean. It was both. It was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why did I lose the baby? When can I try again? And, just thinking about what I could do differently to make sure that I, kept the baby the next time. But then also being really afraid of, if I get pregnant again, will I just lose that one too? So then just being like avoidant of it or even thinking about it. It was very complicated. So then in March, and I should also say before I go on that during this time we were still doing the abstinence dance. So, we were fairly abstinent because we weren't married. We did end up getting engaged in February. So I knew that, we were going to get married, but we weren't married yet. And so we barely had sex. Like it was always like a night of passion if it did happen. But other than that, it was a lot of abstinence happening. And, so yeah, March came around and I was actually trying out for the Texans cheerleaders. I decided I wanted to do something to take my mind off of the loss. And I had tried out in the past a couple of years. And in the last time that I tried out, I made it to the finals. And I felt like I had learned a lot from that experience, and just being a little bit older, a little bit more confident and knowing what they were looking for, I decided, well, let's try out this year. And so I was in prep for that, doing a lot of workouts, doing a lot of choreography classes, just trying to get my body right, preparing my uniform, or I should say the tryout outfit. It's not really a uniform, just kind of like putting that together, coming up with my freestyle, all those fun things. I was doing all of that in March because the tryouts were in April. And so, yeah, I was not thinking about making a baby at all. And I'll never forget this. It was March 24th, I think. It was March 20 something. One of my girlfriends had invited me out for happy hour after work, and I was actually not wanting to go because I hadn't really done very much since losing the baby. And yeah, it was just kind of like, the grief and everything like that. But Shane was like, you should go. And my friends were like, come on. So I went and we had a great time. We were drinking tequila, margaritas, and yeah, we just had a fun time. It was just a really nice night out with my girlfriends, and it hadn't happened in a while. So really grateful for that. And when I came home, again, night of passion, I kind of just like jumped on Shane and things happened. Now, what I will say is that he did not shoot up the club, if you know what I mean. He did not. I can promise you that. We've talked about this so many times since then. It didn't happen. He pulled out, y'all. He pulled out. And so I didn't think anything of it the next day. Like I just went on with my life. I mean, there was like, the typical Christian guilt or whatever, but other than that, I felt fine, and he didn't think anything of it either. And so I continued my preparation for Texans, just living my life. And then we'll come to the week of April 4th, because April 4th was a Friday, and that's when I found out that I was pregnant. So in the week leading up to that, I'll start at Sunday. I was noticing that despite all of my efforts to slim down and like prepare my body for the tryouts, I was feeling really bloated. And, some people get bloated and things before their periods, but I typically did not. So again, another blessing, but I didn't really get that problem. And so for me, it was strange to be so bloated. But I just chalked it up to, I don't know. It was just like a random thing. And so I did notice that I was getting close to my period coming. And I was like, well, maybe I should take a pregnancy test. Like, I don't know. Again, it was just like intuition telling me that bloating was my only sign. Like I didn't have anything else. So on that Monday, I went to work, and it was something that I just couldn't let go of thinking about. So on my lunch break, I drove over to Dollar Tree and just got like one of the cheapy tests. And this is just a random other story that is hilarious. I went in and I didn't have any cash, and I didn't have my credit cards for some reason. Like I didn't have any of my cards. I was so irresponsible, y'all. Like Corinne really turned me into a mother. But anyway, I didn't have anything, like not even a license. And so when I drove to the store, I was like, I don't have anything to pay for this test. But it was a Dollar Tree. So I'm like, all I need is $1. So I scrounge up a bunch of loose change in my car, and I went in, and I think I brought $1 exactly. And when I went to go pay for the test, the lady was like, do you have 5 cents? And I was like, no. And I was looking at her like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, I'm going to need that 5 cents because it's $1.05. And I was like, oh my God. First of all, embarrassing. Secondly, why didn't I think about taxes? So I had to go back out to the car, find 5 more cents, come back in. This lady's holding literally just $1 pregnancy test. So embarrassing. Anyway, so I get my, shame and pick it up and go into the car. And I peed in a cup. Why? What was I doing? See, this is where you know that you're pregnant because the irrationality already starts. But yeah, so I peed in a cup and took the test and it was negative. So again, just moved on with my life. And I was like, okay, that's not what it is. Now, in hindsight, it was too early for the test to be positive. When I look back at my chart, I think it was like 5 days before my period was supposed to come or something like that. So yeah, it was just too early. And it was like not the first morning urine. Like, I don't know if that's true, but that's what a lot of the women in the trying to conceive community say. Like, you want to get, if you're testing that early, then you want to get like the most concentrated urine. And that typically is when you first wake up in the morning because you haven't gone to the bathroom all night. So anyway, it was negative. Moved on with my life, continued prep. And the bloating just stayed there. And I remember getting really upset about it because I'm like, I'm eating really well. I'm working out and this is not the time for me to be bloated. Like, tryouts were the next weekend. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So funny enough, I have a lot of allergies and something told me that maybe it was an allergy. Like maybe I had a wheat sensitivity or like something like that. And so I went to an allergist and made an appointment. And it just so happened that she had a cancellation. And so she was like, you can come later today if you want. I have an opening. I was like, oh, cool. So I went to that appointment and she did, like the typical skin poke. I don't know. If you've been to the allergist, then you know what I'm talking about. Like when you hold your arm out and then they put a little allergen under the skin to see if you react. And it was determined that I had a wheat sensitivity. She said it wasn't a full-on allergy, but she was like, probably best to avoid wheat, gluten and things like that and just see how you do. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went home thinking that maybe the bloating was because I was eating wheat and, that's the end of it. Okay, so then later that night, this was now Thursday night. My husband was a trainer at a kickboxing studio, and I decided that I was going to go work out at one of his classes that he was leading. And while I was working out, I noticed that my boobs were like very big, like very full. I had a sports bra on, but like they were bouncing all over the place. And I was like, that's a little strange. And funny enough, when we talked about it later, he actually noticed the same thing. Like he said, in the middle of his class, he was talking or like leading and he noticed my boobs bouncing and he was like, wow, that looks really nice. So he noticed it too. And when we came home from the class, we were just talking in the living room, like cutting it up or whatever, just talking about the class. And I remember doing a move and I felt like a tickle in the middle of my uterus. Like it's a weird way to describe it, but if you've been pregnant before, then you kind of know what I'm talking about, where it was just kind of like a strange feeling. Like it wasn't a cramp. It was just kind of like a sprinkling of something in my uterus. And I remember that feeling from when I was pregnant the first time. And I kind of like stopped in my tracks and had a deer in the headlights look. And he was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, nothing. And I just couldn't like shake the feeling all night. I was thinking about it like, oh my God, am I pregnant? Am I pregnant? Like how? We had only had sex one time that entire cycle. I forgot to say that after we had the miscarriage, my cycles weren't perfect and I wasn't tracking it because we weren't having sex. So I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to it. I just didn't think anything of it. So when I was laying in bed staring at the ceiling at night, I was like, could it be that I could be pregnant? Yeah, so I couldn't sleep and I ended up dozing off for a few hours and then waking up at like 4 a.m. And at 4 o'clock, I felt just like a hint of nausea. And I was like, am I pregnant? Like I couldn't lay there anymore. So I got up and I didn't have any pregnancy tests, but I did have ovulation sticks. And I remember reading again in the TTC community that ovulation sticks will show up positive if you're pregnant. And so I just tried it. So I peed in a cup and put the ovulation stick in there, and sure enough, the test line was darker than the control. Like it was so dark. And I was like, "Oh my, what does this mean?" And I only had one stick. I only had one test. So I was like, "Okay, well, I can't sleep now. I can't do anything because I don't know what this means." So I looked up Walmart's hours, and turns out they were open 24 hours. So I got in the car in the middle of the dark at 4:30 in the morning, drove to Walmart, got a real pregnancy test, and I carried the cup of pee with me in the cup holder. And so I did the test in the Walmart parking lot, and y'all, for sure, I was pregnant. It showed up right away. Like there was no waiting. There was not a 5 minutes. Like that line was there as soon as the, liquid started to cross over the test. So yeah, that was a shock. And I remember sitting in the parking lot just staring at the test like, what? I couldn't believe it. Like I literally could not believe, first of all, one time, right? Second of all, I couldn't believe that we actually made a pre-cum baby. Like all of those years in, sex ed in school, and we actually became the statistic of people who get pregnant off of pre-cum. Good for us. And then lastly, I was just shocked because, yeah, I guess I wondered if my fertility was strong after losing the baby, and the fact that we were pregnant again was just amazing. And of course, I was thankful, but the immediate nerves kicked in of I'm going to have to like go through pregnancy again, and what if I lose the baby, and all of those fears were there almost immediately. So by the time I drove back home, Shane was waking up for work. He had a job where like he had to be up really early, and so he saw me coming in. He's like, "Where are you coming from?" And I just started sobbing like immediately, and I had the test in my hand, and he looked at it and he was like, "How?" He literally said, "How?" And it was the same feeling that I had, because it was just like trying to think back to when we even did the deed. And it was one time, and yeah, like you already know the story, so I'm not going to say it again, but we were both in a state of shock. And then like the first thing that I could utter was that I was scared. And obviously y'all know that I had a beautiful baby girl who is now 4 years old. So there was nothing to be worried about. She was absolutely perfect and healthy in every way. And I always say that her personality perfectly fits her conception story. And now that you guys know it, it's even more so the case. Like she is fiery and bold and self-assured, and she knew that we were going to be her parents, and she was like, I'm not waiting, I'm coming right now whether y'all are ready or not. And that's still her personality to this day. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and I don't want this to run too long, but I also want to do Eli's story justice because it's the most beautiful in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this episode here, and I'm going to do a part 2 of the conception stories where I really break down Elias's birth story. It is the one that was the most conscious and the most spiritual, honestly. So yeah, we're going to save that story for next time, and be sure to tune in for that because it is the one that I love the most. I mean, I love every story, but this one is truly my favorite. If I'm honest, I'll never let Corinne know that, but it's truly my favorite, and it's something that I want to take my time on. So for now, I hope you guys enjoyed those 2 stories. As I said in the beginning, I want to reiterate that it's rare to conceive on the first go. We were blessed to do so both times, but if you're in the process of, trying for a baby, please, please, please don't hold yourself to any standards, and comparing yourself to other people, because everyone's story is different. What I would recommend, if you're finding that it's taking a little longer than you expected, to just be thinking about some of the ways that you can increase your chances, just general health is always going to be a good place to start. I talked about some of the things that you can do in previous episodes, so definitely check that out. We Natal is a prenatal brand, but they also have some really good resources on Instagram specifically, and I'm sure on other platforms as well. I'm just not on all of them. They give a lot of resources on how to improve your fertility. There's also a book called Real Food. I talked about it in a previous episode. So I think it's called Real Food for Pregnancy, but there's also Real Food for Fertility. So look into that as well because that's going to be a nice resource for you. I hope you guys enjoyed my beautiful stories about my beautiful children. And I look forward to sharing the story about Elias John's conception next week. If you want to reach out to me, I am on Instagram as Blossoming Mama 12. I have the same tag on Facebook, and then I also have a YouTube, which is The Blossoming Mama. I also have a website that you can find in the show notes where, if you're interested in reading specific things, I have a bunch of blog posts about various topics relating to pregnancy, womanhood, birth, and all of those things. So you can check that out as well. All right, my friends, I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care of yourselves.